Frogman Friday.
Yeah, boy.
What's up, my people? It's that time again. Welcome to the Frogman Friday show.
Presented by Transcend, the best peptide and hormone therapy. They put your health first so you can live more and worry less. Go to transcendcompany.com/Birdman to begin your wellness transformation today.
Today, our badass guest is Anthony Stazicker, aka Staz, CGC. British SBS, 13 years of service, completed service as a sergeant. He co-founded ThruDark in 2018 in Poole, England. Staz also penned the book, The Hard Road Will Take You Home, which can be picked up on Amazon and Spotify. Just recently, he and his team of incredible men did the unthinkable by traveling from England to Mount Everest, summiting and returning home in just 7 days, calling the project Mission Everest. You can catch Staz on Instagram, and to take a deeper dive, go check out ThruDark.com. Brother, welcome to the show.
Mate, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You know, it's amazing to read just this stuff off, which you've got tons of other stuff you've your hands in, yet you're also a father and a husband. I don't know how you do it all, man, and I really want to dig into all this stuff. So first question I always ask everybody, you get out of the service, that's an interesting thing for a high-level operator such as yourself. What is your transition, or what was your transition like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, look, for most people that are listening, or most people that have endured, is probably the wrong word, some level of service and give back. And for me, that was the military. It formed a huge part of my life. And I'm very grateful for the opportunities, but more importantly, the people that I was surrounded by. And it really did and does shape individuals. You know, whether we like to admit that or not, we are institutionalized beings. And some of us take to that better than others. But also you have to balance that decision making around ultimately when you leave, you know, if you can leave. And for me personally, the decision was my decision. So, you know, look, I'd spent 3 years in the Royal Marines. I joined about 21 years old in 2005. I was a sniper in the Royal Marines. I did my first operational deployment to Afghanistan and Kabul. I had my first introduction to UK Special Forces there, kind of, you know how it was back then in jeans and flannel shirts and cool kit, long hair, beards. And I thought, you know, looking over the fence, I want to be one of those guys. What do I need to do? I returned home, you know, did my sniper course, and then enrolled myself onto Joint UK Special Forces selection in 2008. I then went on to sort of serve for 10 years down here in Poole on the south coast, where the Special Boat Service are based, and had an incredible tenure. You know, that really did sort of shape and form the person that I am today. Multiple combat tours, you know, lots of interesting tours, and again, lots of courses. And I was moving up through the ranks, you know, relatively quickly, given my sort of experiences. And however, coming into sort of 2017, I was a sergeant. I was the chief sniper instructor, so I was sort of involved with and the delivery of sort of long range shooting and snipers within the group and the service, but also some of the small arms stuff as well, everything from pistol to, you know, CQC, CQB stuff. So, and I loved it. I absolutely fucking loved that job. It's everything that I wanted and more. I was, you know, some people are sort of born and made to sort of serve and be in the military, and to serve at the very tip of the spear at the top, for me, was incredible. But also, it was for me, it was also a very selfish job. You know, it took its toll on my first marriage and other relationships, you know, because you have to be all in. And I had no problem with that at the time when I was a young thruster running around, sort of, you know, not sort of warmongering or particularly that bothered, but for me, I just loved it, and I always wanted to be away, and very sort of selfish. And you know, when that broke down, and actually when I was moving up the ranks in terms of, you know, becoming a sergeant and then moving further away from kind of operationals and more into a teaching role, I kind of looked forward, and it's easy now to connect the dots looking backwards, but I looked forward into terms of what my personal and professional career, you know, could look like. And actually, I didn't want to be further away. I didn't want to be a sergeant major, as it is down here, or a squadron sergeant major. The job didn't appeal to me, and within that 10 years, it was kind of glory years, and not arguably it was the busiest operational output the unit had ever seen. And I ticked all of my professional boxes, had too many close shaves, I've been blown up, and all the kind of good stuff that we do get involved with. Too many close shaves. I think I'd used up all of my, well, 8 of my 9 lives. And sort of having that moment of clarity to zoom out and think, I'm at the very sort of top here of my game, and I want to leave on my terms. I had injuries as well, like most people, and just hit it very well. But I was having issues with my kind of lower back from, I mentioned there, since being blown up in an IED. I was in a vehicle, and I'd met my now wife Ruby, and I just thought, right, I need to make a decision here and pivot. I'm 33 years old. There's still plenty of gas left in the tank. And around this time, Louis, the other co-founder of ThruDark, also former SBS, similar junction. He was being medically discharged for his lower back. There's a similar thread and theme here. And we were actually out in a jump zone in Blythe, out in sort of California, the arse end of nowhere. I'm sure you've jumped there. And we started talking about what life could potentially look like, on the way out. And typically with people with our skill sets and our experiences, we transition, relatively easily and naturally into very high paid, close protection jobs and security jobs within that industry. And we did that initially when we left. We sort of cherry picked some jobs and worked with a couple of guys that from your side, and that helped us out massively. And we were working Super Bowls and NFL, NBA, and all these kind of cool jobs. But actually, what that did for me, that sort of small period of sort of 6 months to a year, while we transitioned out of the military and formulated and set up ThruDark, it just confirmed what I kind of already knew, that actually that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that's not to bash on people that do security or anything like that, because it's an incredible job and it's exciting and it allows you to still have that connection with that world. But for me and Louis, we had this idea, this concept of ThruDark. So this is a very long way of answering your question. It's difficult when you leave. This is the weave. I'm going for the Donald Trump weave here. It is very difficult, but it's also very personal. It's a personal decision that's layered across, multiple differing reasons that have to make sense to you as an individual. Now, unfortunately, some people have that decision removed from them.
Right.
And that's difficult. That is far more difficult than how I had to, see the world when I was leaving. It was kind of on my terms when I was ready. So it is difficult and different depending on your circumstances. But look, it was great. It was an incredible brotherhood and really did set me up for success, not just like professionally, but also personally. I learned a lot about myself, about how to be a good person, and how to be a better husband and a better father.
That's amazing, man. I mean, you and I shared very similar paths just across the pond. Same thing, enlisted, sniper, cruised up the ranks. I didn't do 13, I did 8 years, but it does. I mean, it's such a cool job. No matter which branch in the military and special ops you're in, it's just a cool job. Like, I get to do this every day. You're kidding me? I'm in. And so it's just so great. And I totally get what you're saying. Like, I had just had enough. I had multiple deployments, back to back, hard training, consistent training. And at some point you're like, I mean, what are we doing here? Like, we started to slow down on our side. It wasn't going as kinetic anymore. And so I was like, I'm done. I'm good. So transition, though, even though it was on my own terms, is still hard, like you said, because it is your brotherhood. You don't see the community every day. You don't immerse yourself in getting all the razz and just everybody making fun of you and partying with you and all that stuff. Although you've seemed to do a pretty good job of sticking around, keeping up with the boys, and actually, being around everybody, which is so smart, so good. So let me file forward into ThruDark. Did you always know that you were an entrepreneur style type, or does this just come to you when thinking about it?
No, I think I didn't always know that I was entrepreneurial. I think what I did know, though, is what environment I'd like to work and operate in. And that was fluid. It was relaxed. It was on my terms, me choosing, not being told what to do. And I know that sounds counterintuitive from a person that spent 13 years in the military, but actually that's why most people who are like us, high energy, high output, probably on the spectrum with ADHD and all that good stuff. Actually, I thought, I don't want to be told what to do. I'm not corporate. I cannot bear the thought of sitting in an office. And so for us, we kind of just fell into this world of entrepreneurship. We had an idea in terms of ThruDark, and I guess what starts out as a lifestyle brand, what do we like doing, and where are we competent? Outdoors. We love the mountains. We love being outdoors. Why can't we turn that into a job? We've operated and thrived in some of the world's most inhospitable conditions, and Scotland, which is probably arguably worse than all the places that we've been. And we've worn all the kit and equipment and clothing, and we, found fault in everything. And actually, I think one of the defining moments for me was I was doing a full mission profile jump out in Jordan, pre-deployment, and had all the kit and equipment on, my sniper, all that kind of good stuff, and 18,000 feet on oxygen, exit the aircraft, and listen, right, nothing to do with my terrible exit, but I found myself in a world of hurt with a bag of washing above my head, and very quickly had to make the decision to pull my reserve. Now, to add insult to injury, sort of mid descent, somehow my jacket and parts of the clothing had come apart, the zip had failed, the jacket's flailing in my face, and you sort of have that moment of kind of peace and clarity. And I was sort of 600 short of the DZ, and again, ironically, one of the best landings I've ever had with nobody there to see it. And I just sat on my bag, and I smoked at the time, and sort of lit up a cigarette, and was just like, wow, that was a close one. But for me, it was like, look, we've operated in the jungle, in the Arctic, in the desert, and we know what good kit looks and feels like, but also how important good kit and equipment is as well to mission success. So we had this idea, ThruDark was born, and we thought, well, the outdoor market has a certain look and appeal. We want to be different. We're going to be functional first and foremost. We're going to create the best clothing that we can, and it will perform. And very closely second to that was, it's got to look fucking cool. It has to look cool as fuck, because look good, feel good, operate good, all that good stuff, and sprinkle a little bit of SF sort of fairy dust all over it. And we still now to this day design, develop, and test all of the kit and equipment ourselves. We don't just stand by the kit, we stand in it. I think that resonates with our audience pretty well. And to the point which I'm sure we'll move on to, in terms of not just sort of climbing local mountains, but now sort of standing at the top of the world's tallest mountain with Mission Everest, and sort of, again, testing and validating our own sort of kit and equipment. So yeah, when we left, we had the idea, and I'm sort of condensing now the best part of 8 years into a rambling 4-minute sort of section, but I hope that gives a bit of an idea as to what the vision in terms of what we had for the brand and who would be involved. And then it grows, and it morphs, and we've had a lot of help and support along the way. We've surrounded ourselves with some very, very intelligent people, some good investor, and yeah, we've sort of built this out now. And as we sort of sit here today, we're looking at a valuation of around 45 to 50 million pounds. We've over 40 staff, multiple external agencies supporting, and there's no such thing as a self-made man, I believe, Ryan. And call it luck, fortune, whatever that is, or good decisions at the time. And we've made some terrible decisions as well, like launching an Arctic Parker in the height of summer. But a lot of the times our values remain the same, and that was just an early learning stage. That particular comment or example I give of the Arctic Parker was because we weren't happy with the product, and we just kept pushing it, more samples. I think we did 9 rounds of samples on this Expedition Parker, and but when it released, we could hand on heart say that is the best Expedition Parker on the planet, and was tested to the nth degree. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey. I've turned into an entrepreneur now, a businessman. I understand the world of business and a spreadsheet, and if I'm sort of laughing, but I'll tell another very quick story before we move on. But we sort of set up the business, myself and Louis. We put all of our own investment into the business. We backed it ourselves. I had to sell my Harley, which I'm still have a tear about to this day. And we had a very good friend of ours, first and foremost, Steve Clark, but he's a very successful businessman, an investor. And he sort of helped. He heard us talking like all good plans are formulated over too many beers in the pub. and sort of said, look, guys, you guys are leaving soon. What's the plan? What's the, the hope, the dream, the vision? And we told him about ThruDark, and, he jumped on and was bought in, I guess, more so because of me and Louis and our background, and thought, I don't know what they're selling yet, but I'm buying it. And if they put this much energy and effort and passion into the business as they have their previous roles and life, then I'm sure it'll be a success to some degree. So yeah, he's been instrumental in that, and he sat us down in the boardroom when we had our very first board meeting, quote unquote board meeting. It was me, Louis, and Steve, and just the three of us. And he fired up the spreadsheet and sort of said, this is a P&L, this is a balance sheet, management accounts, and I think he could just see the confused look on my face, and he sort of laughed and said, "Look, Staz, I said, listen, Steve, this is no fun for me. I want to be outside testing, garments. I'm all about product and brand." And he said, "Yeah, I get that, but you will have to learn this, and someday you will not just learn it and understand it. You'll actually quite enjoy it." And he's been correct. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It is cool to learn new stuff. I'll tell you one thing. So no matter where when you see ThruDark's gear, it's a statement. It's different. It is different than everything else. Our team, when we did 7X, everybody got their gear. I got totally screwed, which I'll tell you that story, which is hilarious. But everybody's wearing their gear and like, this is the greatest stuff in the world. Those gray hoodies that you have are the softest, where everybody's like, I got to keep buying more and more, because they're just, you said functionality, but then there's comfortability, and then there's absolutely the cosmetic look to it. Like, they've got everything going for them. For rugged terrain, to in the boardroom can rock and roll with it too, right? So
Yeah.
it's really cool. Why did you name it ThruDark?
Oh, good question. So I think you probably spend far too long or apply too much cognitive load to a name and then the brand mark. But actually, I think ours is pretty cool in so much that, we had an agency come in as well and somebody support us around this, because, God, mate, if I showed you some of our initial ideas and scopes, and we had wolves on mountains and all the typical things you'd probably expect that we would come up with.
Yeah.
And then we got the branding company in, and they professionalized that. But we always had the name ThruDark. And for us, it was a nod back to our old military heritage and operations, which were conducted mainly through the hours of darkness, so ThruDark. We spelt it differently so that it would search term easier across social media platforms, etc. But also, our mantra is endeavor through adversity. And that's linked to the name as well, because at some part or period in your life, no matter who you are, you have to go through some difficult, dark periods, and it was about sort of nodding to that and allowing the understanding and the connection through people as individuals going through difficult times, and us hopefully being a brand that could inspire people. We always wanted to be aspirational, and that was through the outdoors. And actually, COVID happened, which wasn't on our fucking whiteboard, Ryan. That wasn't on the business plan. But this
You don't say.
readjustment, yeah, I know, right? This readjustment of people's minds to think, right, this is a bad time, and my health and my well-being is important, and it should be the number one priority. And we were sort of saying, look, endeavor through adversity is the thing around. Everybody goes through shit times, no matter who you are or what stage. And if you haven't already, it will happen and it will come. It's inevitable. And there's differing degrees of that, clearly. But we just wanted to say we're the brand that recognizes that, and that we're here to support that through action and through inspiration and through social media, but hopefully showing people that there is a different way to live across core values. And some of our values in the company, in unity and trust and humility and all these core tenets that were pretty staple within, the relentless pursuit of excellence through the special forces. And we sort of pulled a little bit that across, and hopefully have use the correct social media platforms and channels in the right way with the right messaging. So that was ThruDark. And then the brand logo, for people that, well, I can see it if people are watching behind my head, it was, some people think, oh, it's a trident. It's not. It's actually an antimony symbol, or a take on the antimony symbol. Antimony, there's kind of two meanings. One is the inner animal or the inner wolf, and sort of helping each other. And it also has a metalloid entomology sign as well, and that's the chemical symbol for that was SB2S, so SBS. So again, a nod back to what we used to do. We then changed it slightly. We put the dagger from the SBS on the bottom, and then we put a circle around it to sort of enclose that together as a kind of a brotherhood sort of meaning, that we're all kind of in this together and like a circle of sort of trust. But yeah, there's the kind of meanings.
That's legit, man. I mean, but that's the key, right? It's your culture. You're building a brand that has a culture behind it. And that's important, right? So you got to spend the time doing the legwork to make sure that it stands true. Like I was saying, I was just in Mexico with my family for vacation. I'm walking. I see this guy I think he was wearing a hat, and it had your logo on. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
let's have a chat. And it was really cool. And I was like, hey, do you know Staz? Because you know how it goes. You find out he's a military guy. You're like, you know Staz? He's like, oh, I know him. I don't know him, but I know him. And I'm like, cool. I know him. So I'll get you an autograph if you want.
Yeah, but I love hearing stuff like that, and it's gathering a lot of momentum now. We sell into 130 something countries, and we sort of have operations and factories all over the world as well. And but it still gives me great joy when I have lots of people and friends or connections that are all in the weirdest and most wonderful places in the world, and they'll message or send a photo and say, "Look at this, I'm in fill in the blank," and this guy's wearing your stuff. And it's like that's still a pinch me moment, and something that I don't think I'll ever sort of forget. And I remember the first time me and Louis saw somebody that we didn't know, because when you start a brand, it's just being propped up by friends and family and everything
For
else,
sure.
isn't it? And the first time we saw somebody in London, we were there for a meeting, and somebody was across the road, and I think me and Louis sprint over to this guy. He thinks we're gonna mug him or something, and we're like, cool t-shirt. And but no, it's good. It's good.
That's awesome. Well, the cool thing about it is when you see a different piece of gear out there and you don't know that person, the intentionality that was put behind it to create it. That's what's special about it. It's not just something off the shelf that was created just in 2 seconds and then there it is. You consistently watch your social media, and you guys are always in that room looking at different. Every time we were getting ready for talks a couple of years ago for 7X, we're getting ready to go into another meeting to talk about gear and design and all that stuff. You're constantly doing that and innovating, which is hats off to you.
Yeah, thank you, mate. It is a long process, and probably something, without going into too much detail, if people aren't into manufacturing or in this world, and I'm kind of consumed by it now. We use the term loosely from door kicking to fabric pulling. I get excited about fabric and zips and buttons now, Ryan, which is pretty sad. But it's that attention to detail, which I think is incredibly important, and we're still very much heavily involved in that across product and then brand and the delivery in terms of how we turn up, in terms of the aesthetic and the messaging and everything else. But the concept from, okay, a good example is we've just launched our new Mountain Pro range today. And that is the culmination of about 18 months of real hard work, lots of meetings, lots of design development, testing, sampling, everything from fabric selection to trims to everything, factory visits, and this takes such a long time. And most people just see the polished version, don't they? They just see the cake turn up and put on the table, and everybody just fucking galls on the cake, and that's fine. But actually, there's been a lot of ingredients and a lot of time and energy and effort, not from ourselves, but from the whole team. And this is just one range. We have multiple ranges. We have the outdoor. We have three main product pillars. We have the outdoor product pillar, we have an active product pillar, and then a utility product pillar. And they pretty much speak for themselves. But each one of these products, we have multiple SKUs across all of these different pillars. And it's basically all the stuff that we like fucking doing, Ryan, selfishly. It's all the outdoor stuff. It's the kit and equipment that we want and would use. And then that transcends then across into the gym space. So gym workout clothing, jiu-jitsu clothing, running stuff, trail running kit and equipment. And then we've got the kind of utility stuff, which is we've coined that kind of everyday operator look. And that's when you're not on the mountain or in the gym, what are you wearing? And that's everything now from sort of jeans to sort of hoodies and more relaxed canvas and flannel shirts, etc., etc.
What I can imagine what your closet looks like for sure.
Black.
Yeah.
My wife's like, come on, please just wear something different. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'll share this funny quick story and then we'll jump into your book. So when we started 7X years ago, we partnered with you guys, and you were super kind to say, we're going to outfit your team with our cold weather gear and just gear in general so we can move through our process for our 7-day trip. And I was so inundated with putting the business plan behind it, the stuff that we both have to nerd out on now, the
Yeah.
shit that I do. I still hate it though. I still hate PowerPoints and all that stuff. Like, it drives me nuts. And so we're putting this together, and I'm like, all right, I'm too busy. And I put one of my buddies who's over at Delta, I put him in charge of like getting my gear set up. Like, order me. I'm a medium. I know I look huge in video, but I'm a medium. So I'm like, just get me a medium, whatever you're getting. Well, I didn't realize that he is a complete minimalist. He screwed me so bad where I see everybody wearing Gucci gear, and I'm like, you motherfuckers.
Brilliant.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was great,
You had
man.
a pair of socks and some base layers, and that's it. You're good to go, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I was like, well, we'll be dealing with this later. So when we were on the trip, I actually stole some of his gear. So
Like
we're
it.
good to go. All right.
Like it.
Well, you're growing this company. You guys are moving fast too, and you've been moving fast for a while. Probably since you started, you've been on a unique trajectory because you guys take this seriously. So where do you find time to pen a book?
Yeah, good question, mate. Actually, that was during COVID, right? So that wasn't on my personal whiteboard. It wasn't a plan. Zooming out, why write a book? You know, it's something that I'd never crossed my mind. I'd not thought about it, and I was approached by a ghostwriter that had written books for Foxy. He's a very good friend of ours, former SBS guy, and a few others, but mainly sports, so like Usain Bolt and all these other kind of high flying, fast running individuals. And the timing kind of worked, although we were incredibly busy. There's actually a lot of stuff that we had some time to sort of, or downtime or at home to think. And I thought, you know what, there's never a good time to do anything. There's never a good time to start a business. There's never the right time to write a fucking book. And I initially came up with lots of barriers and reasons why I shouldn't. But then actually spoke to Louis and a few others. I sought some counsel from a couple of people that, or opinions that I respect, because then you have the dichotomy of, well, I can write a book, but then should I write a book given our background? You know, when we join,
Right.
you know, we have signed the Official Secrets Act. You know, we know what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we would never do anything to put anybody at harm that is currently serving or has previously served in the past. And you have to wrestle that in your own mind and think, am I doing this for the right reasons? So for me personally, it was about not so much an autobiography or war stories. It was more around my kind of life lessons that I'd learned, you know, the failings that I'd had, and then how I'd then applied that to business, you know, moving forward to hopefully allow people, you know, it's a business tool book. It's something that will, you know, leaning onto my experience clearly in my past endeavors, but it was more so to help people potentially from our community. And I've had a lot of sort of praise from other people externally coming in and saying, look, this has really helped me in terms of how I now shape my current business or people that are starting a business. And it's there, you know, it's helped them along that journey. So for me, that's a win. So yeah, I found the time during COVID, and it was nostalgic. It was painful, beautiful, all of those things. And then I had the huge hurdle of trying to navigate what is our disclosure cell. I'm sure you have something very similar in the US, which was painful. Unfortunately, not a great process, and very personality driven. And the guy in the role at the time was just really, really painful to work with. You know, they should be helping us to guide and steer the conversation and the book. And it was just a slam door in the face continually. And I actually had an interesting conversation. So the title of the book, The Hard Road Will Take You Home, the idea for the title, or that phrase, something that I've carried with me since I was in basic Royal Marines training, and when I first joined up, I was down in Exmouth at the Commando Training Centre, and I was halfway through my training. We were just about to break for the summer leave period, so we were having sort of 4 to 5 weeks, and then we turned back up. I was maybe 20 weeks into the 32 weeks training. And we were sat on the bottom field. The bottom field is kind of notorious. It's where where you get beasted and thrashed, all the rope carries, you carry all your kit. It's the assault course sort of part. And all the different troops are there. And each troop, I was 897 troop, each troop is dislocated by 2 weeks. So you've got a troop 2 weeks in front of you and a troop 2 weeks behind you, and then 2 weeks in front of them, 2 weeks behind them. And, you know, and it's the big sausage factory. And so there's a huge amount of people on the bottom field, and we were being addressed that day by a bit of a legend, Colonel Thorpe, former SBS operator, a man mountain, quite wiry, but just a huge, imposing character. And I remember he sort of stood atop the grassy knoll, this famous grassy knoll where mostly the PTIs would be sort of screaming and shouting orders to you. And the whole fucking, as soon as he sort of was presented to have a quick talk to us, the whole fucking place just went deathly quiet. You could hear a fucking pin drop. And he sort of did this brilliant brief around us, this sort of where we were at that current time in our lives and how important it was to continue to do the things that we're doing and the manner in which we're doing it, and to stay true to our core values and really embrace the process. And he then sort of went on for a bit, and one of his closing sort of lines and address was around, don't take easy options. You're here for a reason. It's difficult. Push through that. Lean into it. And remember, the hard road will take you home. And it just really so the hairs go up on the back of my neck when I sort of say it and think about that moment, because it really struck a chord with me. And I thought, he's fucking right. In this day and age, and then, and even more so now, people are looking for the fucking easy solution.
Yep.
Everybody wants the summit. Nobody wants the fucking climb. We've heard all of these, bullshit things that people have made famous across podcasts, but there is some truth in that. A lot of people, they just want it now. We've become, and social media and everything else has a lot to answer for, and people right now, they just don't understand that process that you must go through. And even in business, people, that's all right for you now, you're doing this and that. Well, I've had 8 years of pushing fucking uphill, and lots of no's and difficulties personally and professionally, and no too dissimilar to anyone, but it really struck a chord just to do the right thing. And, oftentimes, taking the hard road and doing the difficult thing is the right thing to do. And often you won't go too far wrong in life if you carry that through. So I was speaking to Colonel Thorpe because I wanted him to do maybe an introduction of my book. I said I was put in touch with him for an old work colleague. And I introduced myself and said, explain that story that I've just told to you. And I said, I'd love you to form part of this book if you would be keen, maybe an introduction or a quote or something. And he said, yeah, let me meet with you. And he's a very busy guy, but he has a holiday home down here in Poole. And one day he meets me. He said, "Come and meet me at this bench, and it overlooks the beach down there. It's beautiful." And he's got one leg. One of his legs is amputated, not through service, but through stuff after. And so he's kind of hobbling along. Still a very big, imposing, wiry guy, but Father Time has caught up somewhat. And we sit on this bench and have the most bizarre sort of meeting. Now, he's sort of, whether or not he was luring me into this, but he sort of brings a flask. We have some tea. Typically being British, we drink tea while we're talking, and he sort of says, look, I'm happy to support this if it's signed off from a disclosure level. He said, but I really want to ask you why you're doing this. And he gave me his background. I'm from the old age of, this, and we don't talk about that. And, I don't think it's right that people are going on TV. I don't think it's right that people have social media platforms. I don't think it's right that people are writing fucking books. It should go to the grave. So now at this point, I'm on the back foot. I'm thinking, shit, he's kind of lured me in on the messages saying, I'd love to help. What a fantastic story. And now he's looking in the whites of my eyes, and I have to give him an honest answer. And I just sort of said, look, this isn't for self-gain. This is not something, it's not me, licking my own lollipop or anything like that. That's not what I'm about. But actually, if I really break this down simply, why did I join the Special Forces or the military in general? A couple of things. One was the kind of, to the Twin Towers event, and then it was Iraq. And I could see this unfolding and happening across my screen. And for me, I was reading books at the time, and Andy McNabb books and Special Forces books and Royal Marines books and books that weren't forced for me to read when I was at school, but things that actually interested me in history and British military history, etc. And they really did help shape and formulate my viewpoint in terms of me joining the military. So when I sort of threw that back and said, well, look, the books have inspired me. If everybody took everything to the grave, what a crying shame that would be.
Yeah.
And he sort of was like, oh, yeah, that's a good point, and one that I've not really thought about. So yeah, unfortunately, I continued with the book, and he didn't write in the end. I went for my friend Foxy. But yeah, it was, but I guess when did I do it? Yeah, during COVID. Why? Hopefully I've explained that to some degree.
Yeah. Well, so this is something because I think it's similar in every special forces group, right? The whole idea is you join, it's about everybody. We don't disclose anything. So we're trained right out of the gate. We don't say shit.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But as we've started to get smarter about things, the marketing material that I had to look at Navy SEALs was of Vietnam guys. And we don't do that shit anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was actually sitting in a bar after a retirement of one of my teammates, and the guy who was in charge of everything for Naval Special Warfare on the enlisted side walks in, and we started talking. And I said, hey, what is your take on all that stuff that's going on right now? He's like, well, I'm tired of the books and the movies and shit like that. And I said, why? Because the only thing I know in life is you got to look at both sides of the spectrum before you actually act. And I'm like, why? Tell me why. And he said, because this is glorification. I said, no, you know what it is, man? It's everyone has earned their right to say what they've done because they're the one that put the legwork in to do it. So they've earned that title and they can speak freely on it. Secondly, with professionalism, there's a certain way to go about it, a tactful way and a wrong way. But the other side is, who are our best recruiters for SBS, for SEALs? It's us. And so if we're not telling stories and we're not sharing this stuff, then when are we going to motivate the next generation to be war fighters instead of pansy ass pussies?
Exactly. And I think to your point there, you're exactly right. As long as it's conducted with the right intention and with decorum, then I think I have no issue with that. Yes, sometimes people will cross the line but oftentimes people might not necessarily know where the line in the sand is, or they just get carried away. And look, we're all human, we're all infallible, and I'm sure myself included and other people have made mistakes or maybe overstepped the mark. But when you're judged by other people's kind of perceptions, it's difficult to sometimes understand where that is. And look, my journey, began on a very different path to the one I'm on now. I was a white working class kid from Wigan. My dreams were initially on a football pitch, not a battlefield. And I think I learned early that life's kind of not fair, right? And I lost my mum at a young age when I was 11. I had this failed footballer career. I was playing for England schoolboys. I was affiliated with a professional club. That all got pulled away from me. And the Royal Marines and the military in general just give me a very, very good sense of purpose and professionalism that I needed as a kid. As a young man, as a boy, I wasn't particularly academic, but I was fit and I could apply myself. I was respectful, and that's why it was the perfect fit for me. It's not for everybody, but for me, it absolutely worked. And so I think looking back now and connecting the dots back, it was probably the best decision that I could have made, because where I grew up, there wasn't much opportunity, not much expectation, and especially for further education. So it all just came together.
Amazing, man. Well, you talked about, it's not just about talking the talk, but walking the walk with ThruDark. And that's exactly what you did with Mission Everest. I mean, I saw you guys loaded up in your gear and you take it all the way up and down. So you field tested this stuff to make sure that it was ready to support your insane endeavor. So how did this even begin? Who came up with the idea of let's go start in England, go all the way to Everest, summit this mountain, and back home? I think I read sitting on your couch in 7 days.
Yeah, 6.5 days. I think. Yeah, let's start with the why, and probably back to the point I made earlier. Like all good plans are formulated over too many beers.
Yeah.
Now, initially, I wasn't involved with the beer drinking on that day or that occasion. It was actually two of the other guys that climbed with us. We were a team of four. Al Carnes, who's now he was the Veterans MP, but he's now for Labour. He's now the Minister of Defence. So he was a former commanding officer of the unit, worked all the way up, Chief of Defence Staff, and then did made the call or decision then to go to the dark side into politics to have more of a strategic effect across government and policy. It was him and another guy called Kev Godlington, who's a very good friend of mine now, a very successful entrepreneur. He was ex-SAS, then went into the intelligence service and was then working Foreign Commonwealth Office. He was advisor to the then Prime Minister David Cameron. and has multiple businesses, very successful. Those two guys got together and spoke about kind of veterans and how to elevate veterans profile. So that the why came around those two guys talking about, well, listen, we clearly this is something very close to our hearts. We're all veterans, and there's this kind of stigma at the minute around veterans that we're all mad, bad, and sad, and that's not right. Well, how do we elevate veterans and show that we do have more to give to society and to people and to inspire through action? And why can't we do something that is different, that is outside of our comfort zone, but really does highlight the effectiveness of veterans in terms of the planning and the coordination when we get together? So we then looked at kind of what that would mean and look like in terms of an audacious challenge. And then we also clearly wanted to raise as much funds as possible for some vital charities as well. And in particular, Scotty's Little Soldiers, which help support and deal with bereaved military kids, of which Kev is also a patron of that charity. And a few other charities as well, like the SBS Association and the Clock Tower Fund for the SAS up in Hereford. So that was the kind of why we wanted to do this in terms of veterans and charities, raising vital funds. For me personally, I had some other, selfishly, some personal reasons why I wanted to jump on this challenge. And the obvious and clear one is ThruDark, the brand, again, to test and validate our kit and equipment on the world's tallest mountain in Everest, again, to validate the kit and get some great content around that. But personally, being a father, of three boys, Lucas, who's 13, nearly 14, going on 20, and Albie, who's 8, nearly 9, and little Huey, who's 4. And for me, this is something that we can also touch on if we have time later on in terms of what it means to be a father, and probably the most important role that will ever be afforded. I wanted to show my children through action. I didn't, they've seen some stuff, and I've told them and have constant dialogue about what it means to be a man or a young boy growing up in this confusing world, and what's expected of them, and that what should be their own expectations and my expectations. But I wanted to show them through action, and it wasn't just necessarily to say you have to join special forces, you have to climb Mount Everest, it's all relative. It was more about the challenge. It was more about saying we've set ourselves a challenge, and now what you're going to see is what it takes to make this a reality. So they got to see me sleeping in the and we'll go on to the kind of how in a minute. They got to see me sleeping in the hypoxic tent every night, an oxygen reduced chamber. They got to see me training, 10 to 12 hours a week. A lot of the times just in my garage on a static bike, staring at a brick wall for hours, sometimes connected to an oxygen reducing machine. But then going to the gym and being tired, but still upholding everything else, still going to work, still being a father and and a husband and everything else. But they could see how tired I was, but actually I knew why I was doing it. Even Huey, who's 4, he was kind of doesn't really understand what Everest is. The concept is every hill that we drive by and say, "Is that Mount Everest?" And then he and it could be everything from a small bump in the in the woods to a bigger mountain. And it was more about them then playing on the back garden and then coming into the garage and then watching me and seeing what I was doing. They could see the sweat and the pain, in the training and everything else. So it was more about setting that precedence and showing them rather than telling them. So those are the kind of why we're all doing it. The who, I've already mentioned a couple of people. So it's myself, obviously, Al Carnes, Kev Godlington, and another guy called Garth Miller. Again, Garth was he was a rifle, a Gurkha officer, still serving. Well, he's a reservist now, but he's a BA pilot by day. So this was all about doing something. It was by veterans for veterans. Clearly, we had to pick something that was audacious. Most of the stuff in this world has already been done or thought about in terms of rowing and everything else. And we love the outdoors. We love climbing. So let's climb Everest. Okay, how can we make it different? Well, what's the current sort of speed record of London, up to the top of London and back? The current record was actually held by Garth Miller, the guy that's climbing on our team, and it was 3 weeks. And Garth sort of got together and said, "I think we can do this quicker. If we need a lot of things a lot of lady luck on our side in terms of logistics and weather, but planning will be particularly important. Something that we're very good at, given our background and everything else." And we aligned then to Lucas Furtenbach and Furtenbach Adventures. They're a guiding company. And for most people that don't know, I'll just give a little bit of hopefully a very quick overview of, Mount Everest. It's 29,500 feet. It's the tallest mountain. It forms one of the eight 14,000 meter peaks and above. And it sits in Nepal. And typically for this kind of expedition, you're looking about 8 to 10 weeks. The majority of that time that is spent is acclimatizing in country. So we as human beings clearly are not meant to spend too much time at altitude. It has negative effects physiologically to our bodies. But for us, we had to take a very kind of forward scientific approach to this. We could pre-acclimatize at home. This isn't new science. So lots of athletes and people have pre-acclimatized in hypoxic tents before, of which we did. I spent over 600 hours in this fucking hypoxic tent, mainly sleeping. So we would sleep at altitude and then sort of go about our normal day and train at sea level. Although some parts of the training, 2 to 3 hours a week, were done on the mask at the same level that we were sleeping. And these hyperbaric, hermetically sealed sort of chambers which ultimately looked like a normal tent, something that you go fucking camping in, and it was on the spare bed. Not a chance the wife was going to have that over the main bed. And yeah, like I said, it's hermetically sealed. You get in every night. The tube runs out of it into an oxygen sort of generator, and it reduces the oxygen within the tent, and that reduced oxygen would then simulate the altitude, obviously less the pressure. And this process went on for sort of the best part of 3 to 4 months. And every morning we'd put our details into a huge spreadsheet that would go over to the doctor, and they would check that off and say, what are your sats saying? What's the blood oxygen saying? Your resting heart rate? You'd maybe spend 3 to 4 days at that set altitude or reduced oxygen amount. And then you would move up slightly higher. Then we'd do the simulated altitude rotations, which you would do on the mountain. Part of the benefits of this were clearly the reduced risk of not being on the mountain. One of the most dangerous parts of the mountain is the Khumbu Icefall. It's a huge shifting glacier between base camp and Camp 1. Typically, or 99% of people that traverse that part do it at night time because it's colder and the ice is less susceptible to shifting and moving. But so we had all this at home. We had the benefit of being at home, but then also it's kind of a double-edged sword because you still had to go about your normal daily business. Part of it, me thinks, if you're out in the mountain, that's it, you're there, and you're just relaxing, you're acclimatizing, a little bit of walking out, but you necessarily don't have the distractions of the outside world, where here I was into work every day. I was still doing all the stuff that I normally would do. A lot of other things as well physiologically that we did in terms of altitude centre London. We had all our VO2 and lactate threshold testing done, which then formed the benchmark for our output in terms of training. Like I said before, 10 to 12 hours training, that comprised of gym, strength and conditioning workouts, a lot of time cycling, sat on my ass on the bike, spinning the legs, a lot of zone 2 work, a lot of slow boring stuff, but then some lactate, high energy stuff. And then the weekends was typically spent time on feet, slightly loaded up, nothing more than 10 kilograms, just getting 3 to 5 to 6 hours out on the hills, just walking, a little bit of jogging. But the main thing for us was to pre-acclimatise. That was the single most important factor of success on the mountain, was the pre-acclimatisation process. And we went back to the altitude centre to test that this was actually working. So they have all the chambers, everything set up. They would then test us. We did cognitive testing at 8,000 metres with backpacks on and simple stuff on the phone and colours and numbers. Which I'd probably find hard at sea level, to be honest, Ryan. But so there was a lot of stuff that went into this, and I'm trying to race and rush through this. And yeah, we were all sort of on the very similar sort of levels in terms of fitness and everything else. And then it was all the kit and equipment, the planning, all the then stuff around the awareness, all the meetings, all the fundraising parts and elements of that as well, and getting together as a team as well. But I think for me, I felt confident in the people that we were around, and that has a huge benefit for us. And it was a kind of an ace up our sleeve. Typically, when you turn up to Everest, if you're climbing alone, you're with a guiding company and you're with strangers, right? And a lot of this talk around Everest and look, high altitude mountaineering is inherently dangerous, and you know what you're signing up for. But for me, if I could reduce that risk as much as possible through turning up pre-acclimatized and the fittest that I could or have been to again, reduce that risk element and set myself up and the team up for success, then that's all that I could do. So we set off in May. And yeah, we hit the ground running. We didn't even spend a night in base camp. We left London Heathrow, wheels up, landed into Kathmandu Airport. Kathmandu Airport, we took a helicopter over to Lukla. From Lukla, oxygen adapted helicopter straight into base camp. We got all the kit equipment. We knew what we were doing, met the Sherpas, met the team. We had the purges ceremony, the blessing. And then we moved out that night through the Khumbu Icefall. And yeah, it's sort of slow moving, and there's a lot of bad press around Everest at the moment, but it will always have that attraction and draw as the tallest mountain in the world. It's become very commercialized, and that's a whole different fucking conversation, which we probably don't need to get into, whether or not I agree with that, or the ethics and the beauty around climbing. It's not particularly where I would pick to go climbing, but for me, we had our small little bubble. And also, it's worth mentioning we made national newspapers all over the place, from even the Wall Street Journal over across
Yeah, you
Europe,
did.
New York Times. It went wild, but it went wild mainly not because we broke the record, but also we were at the forward edge of testing out some new science with xenon gas. I was saying xenon because I think that's how you guys say it. And xenon gas, as a quick, I'm not a fucking scientist, but I'll give you my Staz down and dirty description. Xenon is a noble gas. It's in the atmosphere. It's typically used now in things like car headlights, space propulsion, but it's always been used, or more readily used, and we'll be aware of its use in anesthesia. So it's been used since the 60s, and a lot of times you go for an operation, you'll be put to sleep using xenon gas. It's very safe. There's no side effects. The reason that they don't use it traditionally now is because it's so fucking expensive. If you go I'm just talking typically in the UK, if you go in for any form of operation, they won't put you under with xenon. But if you do have a cerebral or respiratory issue, say you're in a car crash, an RTA, and you've had sort of bleeding or swelling on the brain, they'll put you under using xenon because it has neuroprotective properties. As well as allowing to put you under. There's also been some research at the moment going in terms of very, very successful research, and the results look fantastic so far around Parkinson's and a few other sort of brain degenerative issues. Kev, who climbed with us, has a TBI, traumatic brain injury. He was shot in the head in the helmet, so he's having some ongoing stuff at the minute to great success. It has been used previously in high altitude mountaineering, but a very, very small cohort, 15 to 20 people. And again, it's had great success. What that looked like for us in terms of the application of it, we flew out to Germany. If you're going to go and get gas, then go see the experts, I suppose. And it was through Dr. Michael Fries, who's a world-leading sort of expert in this field. And he was the guy who actually approached Lucas Furtenbach from the guiding company and said, have you ever thought about the use or the benefits of xenon in high altitude mountaineering? I think it would work for these reasons. So yeah, for us, it wasn't about making us quicker. It has a very small EPO benefit, but by the time we took it 5 weeks before we went out, so that benefit's already worn off. But for us, it was around the neuroprotective properties for the brain and for the lungs. And the three main killers on Everest are, acute mountain sickness, HACE and HAPE. So HAPE is high altitude pulmonary edema, HACE is high altitude cerebral edema. So if I could take something that would potentially reduce those risks and increase our level of success and safety, then we did, and we were at the sort of forward edge of that science. Now there are some papers coming out and peer-reviewed papers that are going to support what we think and believe. I only have my own experience of how I felt on the mountain, and I felt incredible. I felt great. Didn't even have the semblance of a headache, which is pretty unheard of at altitude. I climbed Amadablam 3 years ago, which is 7,000 meters, and had a torrid time of it. I was sort of in base camp for 4 days with what I can only describe as the world's worst sort of hangover. We had no issues. We were climbing quickly. So for us, it was a no-brainer, no side effects. Go out to Germany 5 weeks before, have a 30-minute exposure of the gas. It was mixed with oxygen, 30% xenon, 70 oxygen. And then, the reason why 5 weeks before it has the best effect, it works on a cellular level. So it works best, or provides the most protection between 4 to 6 weeks. Hence why we sort of timed it there. So back onto the mountain, we hit the ground running. We don't spend a night in base camp. We now move off from base camp up to camp one through the Cumber Icefall, no real issues. But just before camp one, sort of daylight's breaking, it's 5:30 in the morning, and we got hit by an avalanche. And you may or may not have seen the videos that we pushed out. Thankfully,
yeah.
Sandro, our camera guy, was rocking and rolling on the camera and caught the whole thing. And yeah, it was a bit of a surreal moment. But thankfully, everybody was okay. We sort of dusted ourselves off and moved off. Camp one to camp two, we're now getting higher, but we're making good headway. We move up through the next camps, camp three. Camp four is notorious. It is desolate up there. It's like being on the fucking moon. Very, very, it sits in a saddle, very, very high winds. All the tents are fucking ripped up and blown up. There's shit everywhere, dead bodies. It's 8,000 meters. It's the death zone. Again, don't want to be spending too much time here, but camp four is really used as the kind of, as the prerequisite before you move on for your summit push. So you spend a little bit of time there, sort out all your kit and equipment, rehydrate, get the food in you. We had a quick debrief, and actually we were neatly sat in between two groups. Again, by very good coordination from Lucas and the team, we were due to fly out from London the day before. We pushed right 24 hours because of these huge groups that were before us and after us. So we were really threading the needle and sat really, really beautifully between two large groups. The day before, this large group summited. I think they had 11-hour queues, those kind of famous queues that you see on the summit ridge, because it's so tight, people can't pass as one route, one rope, and it causes these huge bottlenecks. And it's really only on the summit ridge, but it makes for a famous photo. Look at all these people fucking queuing to climb Everest. But for us, we were sat perfectly between these two groups, and the decision was made that evening that we were going to go for it for the summit. There were high winds, bad weather, nobody else was climbing, but we said, look, fortune favors the brave was our kind of mantra for Mission Everest, but not to be stupid and be reckless. But we looked at the two main weather models that people use up there, and we were happy to push through some pretty bad weather initially, knowing that should break and should ease. So we set off that evening, and ironically, you could drop a fucking dollar bill. There was no wind at all, and we step off for the first kind of 2 to 3 hours, and it's straight up. And one of the things I said to people when I got back, like, how was it? How did you feel? Like, it was just a long, slow, boring slog for the majority of the time, and not very technical to climb, and not very beautiful, quite commercialized. Felt like I was just on a slow conveyor belt up to the top, and kind of knocked all the magic out of it for me, apart from the summit day. But it's just relentless. It is, and it sounds stupid, doesn't it? It was so fucking steep, but I'm like, yeah, it's Everest, Staz. Of course, it's fucking steep. But what I mean is, there's no real good foot placement. It's all your ankles are all, your feet are at funny positions. You're on the crampons, and it's just uncomfortable. But look, Ryan, we're used to that. We're not averse to discomfort, and we sort of lent into that, and we were fine. No real issues. Everybody was fit and healthy and well. So we go up the South Summit that evening, and the weather does turn. It becomes incredibly windy. We're talking sort of 50 mile an hour to 70 mile an hour gusting. It's minus fucking freeze your balls off temperatures. Thankfully, clearly we're all in ThruDark bespoke summit suits, which were incredible. We had 8 Sherpas, which is unusual. We had 2 Sherpas each, so we kind of doubled down on the support just to ensure mission success. And look, the Sherpas are the backbone of this mountain. Without those guys, 99% of the summits just would not happen. That said, for whatever reason, as the weather turned pretty bad, 4 of the Sherpas decided to turn around. Now, differing reasons. Maybe they thought it was, too dangerous past their own personal risk tolerance. Some of them were cold as well. We didn't have that sort of issue. So they turned around. We had a bit of a mothers' meeting at 8,600 meters, and decided that we would push on. We managed to kind of corral and get around our lead Sherpa Pasang, and just, sort of mask oxygen mask off. Look, this is a no-fail mission. We feel fine. Us 4 guys, we're not your kind of typical punters on the mountain. Yep. We've got people that have multiple summits of Everest already, guys that have climbed technical mountains before. We're former special forces. We've been in worse conditions. We feel fine. Load us up. We can carry more kit. We can stash more equipment here. Not a problem. But this is happening. And I think in the end, the thing that managed to sort of persuade him was, I think we sort of told him, look, if it's still bad in an hour and a half, the sun's going to come up. the wind should die down, but if it doesn't, we will turn round. And he believed us, so we cracked on. And the result, the result was, we had the whole summit ridge to ourselves. So there was not a single soul on that mountain, other than ourselves, which was
Wow.
pretty special. And we got to the summit, on the morning of the 21st of May, around about 7:30 local, and it was just incredible, beautiful. We had about 30 to 40 minutes. We could have spent all day up there, but I think the realization hits that shit, you're only halfway. You got to go all the way back down. So we did what we needed to do. Had the photos, the videos, and bits and pieces done, all the flags. And then, we set off back down, and it was just on a reciprocal route of the way, we'd come up. And then,
Man.
we land back into base camp. We're now sort of, 5 days back into base camp, very tired, very fatigued. They're long days. The summit day in particular is an 18 to 20 hour day. And we sort of fall into base camp, get all the kit off, have a quick bird bath, have some food, quick celebratory beer. Before we knew it, we were on the helicopters back into Lukla, back into Kathmandu, and then we were wheels down in London in 6.5 days. So it was kind of all over, before it started. And then it had, like I said earlier, huge amounts of press and awareness and everything else. But yeah, mission success.
It is a mission success, man. It's hard, when you're doing something in such a confined time frame, trying to go for this, all for these awesome reasons to support these causes and these children. You don't get to enjoy the journey as much. It is so hard because you're so, laser focused. And that's a big thing to our backgrounds, right? You're not going overseas because you enjoy sitting in a war zone for your whole life away from your family and friends. Like, you're laser focused to get the job done and get it going. And
That's a really good point. That is a really good point, because people are like, "How do you feel? You must feel." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, of course, great. I'm just more glad that we delivered in the style in which we said we would." But I was I put a lot of pressure on myself personally and professionally. I've not only am I carrying the flag for ThruDark, I'm carrying the flag for veterans and for special forces, but also I'm carrying the flag as a husband and a father. I've told my kids I'm going to do this, but much bigger than that. This is for a bigger purpose than yourself. So yes, you kind of don't almost get chance to enjoy the fruits of your labor to some extent. And then you get back and you're into all the media stuff, and then you're into the main mission and focus for us now is raising as much money as possible for those charities which we've spoken about. And that continues. We have a couple of charity balls and events that we're doing and auction prizes, and the hope and dream is that we get to at least £500,000, which I could then sort of say not rest easy, but feel better, and probably have a bit of a sigh of relief, I guess.
it's interesting, and it's so funny. Guys like you, you can do this insane thing, but it's not the mission. The mission was raising capital for cause. And so you're like, wow, I just summited Everest in 6.5 days back home, but it's not good enough. Like, we need to hit that number for these children, for these families. And
Or
that's
it's
what
been
makes you
fruitless.
special, man. Yeah.
Yeah, or it's been for nothing. It's just been a fucking jolly, self-replicated jolly to climb the world's tallest mountain, which is not what I was sort of there for.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people out there who go for it for those reasons, man. So there's very few that do what you do, man. I mean, we were watching, our team was cheering you on the whole time, and we never ever for a second thought you wouldn't make it. And I was just like, man, I got to get one of those onesies, dude. Those things look so comfy. I'm gonna sleep in one of those. So you're still fundraising for this, and we're gonna put all this information up about what you have going on with your company, your book, how to get a hold of it, to donate to Mission Everest. Two things I wanted to touch on before we roll. One, you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about family. Talk to me about your fam.
Yeah, thank you, mate. And I'm still confused, and I'm 41 years old. I'm still wet behind the ears, Ryan. I still have hopefully many years ahead of me to try and work out what this is all about and everything else. But I think at its core, it's certainly, and I think that transition through the military, the double-edged sword of all the good things that it gives you in terms of your character, and understanding yourself, and the resilience, and the things then that you can pass across into life, and transfer across into life. But it's difficult, isn't it? Being trying to be all things to all people at all times, trying to be a good husband, trying to be a good father. And because I think the type of people that we have high exacting standards of
Right.
ourselves, and rightly so. We're engaged with what good looks like or what it should look like, and turning up and being present, but still being pulled in, like I said, in all these different directions. But for me, it's the singularity for me of purpose, of everything that I should exist for my wife and my kids, and to try and be the best version of that. And I'm still working it out, still don't get it right, lots of times get things wrong. And it's difficult in this era, and social media, and quote unquote what influencers, and having poor male role models. And I think it's now more so than ever very important. I'm doing some work with Dr. Alex Blower. He's a PhD lecturer down here in Bournemouth at the university, and he's just wrote a book called called The Lost Boys, and it's about how the education system is failing young boys, typically white working class boys. We're sort of forgotten about now, and as we become multicultural, and which is has all its positives but lots of negatives attached to that as well. It's difficult to try and guide young boys in this world right now around, there's so much around masculinity and toxic masculinity and manosphere and red pill and this, and how they're communicating, and and aggression, and it's a huge topic that I don't necessarily want to get into today, but just highlighting, or more so was my message to men that are listening, husbands and fathers, and just to kind of keep fighting the good fight, I guess, and don't beat yourself up too much. We're all guilty of it. God, I shouldn't have done this, or I could have handled that better, or, maybe I've been too harsh here, but then I know why I'm doing that. And, it's tough love, but, but I think just to be there and to help guide and be present, with our kids is super important. More so, now more than ever, with everything that's happened in the media of late, and we spoke about this before, and Charlie Kirk, and everything else that's happening in this fucking confusing world, that we are present and that we are guiding and supporting. And there's that beautiful analogy, and I can't remember who it's from, but it's the whole bow and arrow thing, isn't it? Of we're the bow with the parents, and we want to be strong, and we want to set them up, and we put the arrow into the bow. That's the kid, and you draw it back, and you aim for them almost as they're a kid, aim towards what you think good is, or the target, and you release the arrow, and that's your job. That's your job ultimately done. You can't, once the arrow's left, you can't fucking grab at it and pull it back and have another go. So it's just about really concentrating on being that person. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well, Ryan, on that, and where you struggle, and where you think you win.
Well, I mean, this show's about you, man, but I will say this. Been very blessed to be a part of a lot of cool things, amazing adventures, special operations, some hard stuff that we put ourselves through, and then some hard stuff that you just naturally have to go through. And what's interesting about everything else in this world is that everything has a start and a finish. That going through SBS training, Navy SEAL training, whatever, like there's a start to the program and there's an end to the program. There's a start to the program with being a dad, but there is no end. And just because we raise them to a certain extent or to a certain year, and then they're off doing their thing, it's constant for the rest of your life. And during their youth, their formative years, it's on you to shape them to be good humans, good men, good girls. And it's tough, man. It is a constant grind, because every single day there's days where you come home where you're smoked and you're like, man, I'm tired. Stop yelling, and you just want to yell from them across the room, and it's like, no, you got to go have a sit down conversation with them. You got to put the work in, and it's like you constantly have to remind yourself to do the work. And but the reward again is you're seeing these beautiful individuals being raised correctly, to become what we would want them to be and more, and we want to give them more than we ever had opportunity wise. So I appreciate you asking. It's the hardest fucking job in the world, and I'd sign up for it every day of the week.
Yeah, agreed, mate. It's difficult with everything else that's, everything compounded, all the external stuff and pressures that men have to deal with, right now. And I think that's just getting layered on more and more and more. So, I think these conversations are important, and ones that oftentimes you don't hear men talking about, I feel, especially from guys from our background. And we're normally talking about the other stuff and the glorious stuff, and swinging the lantern, but actually having conversations around, being a good husband, being a good father, what that looks like, and how are you doing it, and what can I learn, and what does good look like for me, and just it's a funny old time.
Yeah, I try to push back. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to social media just because I'm, one, terrible at it. Two, I just don't have shit to say all the time, and if I do, I'm probably going to go nuts on somebody. So I'm like, I could solve a lot of equations just by staying the fuck off of it. I don't see this stuff. And that's something I always say, like, if you have a problem with something and you're on social media consistently feeding that anger, stop doing social media, turn off the news for a week, and see if that shit exists for real around your little circle. And the answer is probably no. So I go to the skate park. That's my joy, is I just go run to the skate park. I skateboard. Yes, I'm a 42-year-old skateboarder. For all of those who are joking right now and laughing, fuck you. So that's my jam, man, because, it's one of those sports where it's painful. It's painful all the time, and it's rewarding when you do something cool, and it's earned. Anyway, so we're going to have you on many times, dude, because there's so much more that you're going to do. I know you guys are mission planning for stuff that we don't even know about right now. And I could just see your eyes. I could see through your eyes, and there's stuff turning in the back of your brain. I'm like, can't wait to see what you guys are going to be up to next. But in closing, I would like to ask you one simple question: is who is your hero and why?
A good question. And this has changed over time. If you'd have asked me this question when I was sort of 16 or 18, I would have referenced somebody like Bruce Lee. I loved everything about him. I read all the books, watched all the films, and that was to me a hero at the time. And I sort of it really aspired to be somebody like that. Asking me right now, it's my granddad. Unfortunately, he passed away last year. Like I said before, my mum passed away when I was 11, so I was raised by my grandparents and her mum and dad. And the sacrifices that they made to move halfway across the country to raise me and my brother, and leave everything behind that they knew, friends, family, house, work, and other commitments their whole life, to raise me and my brother in a little 3-bedroom bungalow in a pit village up in Mansfield. That selfless act, and for him then to now, at the time wasn't aware of it, the values and everything else that he instilled in me, and how selfless he was in his time. I had this promising football career, playing for multiple teams, from school to county to the country to professional team, and I think he missed one game in my whole sort of teenage years. Rain, sun, shine, sleet, snow, he was there. He was always that kind of rock that was on the side supporting me, and getting choked up talking about it. So that to me is what a real hero is. Somebody that's there, that's present, that is unwavering in their support.
Absolutely. What was your grandfather's name?
Philip.
Right on. Big shout out to Philip. That's amazing, man. Hey,
thank you, Ron.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing, brother. Well,
thank you, man.
I appreciate everything that you've done for us. You've been a huge supporter to me and my crew. You guys stepped in when we needed help, just figuring out what we were going to do for 7X, which we're going to unveil later this year. So we finally get to debut everything to the world. I'm not doing massive projects anymore. I got my ass handed to me on this last one. So I'm going to support you guys from now on. And I'll be a cheerleader for you guys, and whatever you need me to carry your trash, take out the shitters, whatever, I'm in. But it's amazing what you've accomplished, man, and what you continue to accomplish. The thing I love about you most is that that it's not stopped for you, that it's just going to consistently continue. You're going to continue to gun it. You're going to continue to learn. You're going to continue to push, and you're going to continue to inspire. And I'm inspired by you, man. So I'm going to be following, and we're going to put everything out for you so that everybody can get in touch with ThruDark, buy a copy of your book, support your charity causes, and see what's ahead for Staz in the future.
Ryan, thank you, mate. Thanks for the opportunity again, as always. And more importantly, thank you for your friendship, mate.
Frogman Friday. Long live the brotherhood.